Good evening, everyone. This week's Parashat Bamidbar, has one of the most obscure or bizarre haftorahs that accompanies the weekly Torah reading. The etymology of the concept of the haftorah is that there were times when the Jewish people were not allowed to have a public Torah reading. The government at the time, going back about 1,500 years ago, didn't want the Jewish people to be connected to the Torah, which the non-Jewish government understood was the lifeblood of the Jewish people, which, God willing, we are re-accepting this coming Shavuos, Sunday and Monday, beginning Saturday night. So they said, well, we'll allow you to read from the prophets because that's like historical and kind of sounds like fables, so why not? Once that decree was annulled by the government, the rabbis who had spent time to select a haftorah corresponding to the theme of that parsha decided, you know what, let's keep both. So this haftorah is from the second chapter of the book of Hosea, which comes from the larger section known as Trei Asar, the 12 minor prophets. There's nothing minor about the prophets themselves. What's minor about them is the size of their works. So anyway, in the second chapter, God tells Hosea, get the Jewish people to do tshuva. And Hosea is like, they're really, really bad right now, so why don't you trade them in and get a new nation? Why are we it's like taking an old clunker. The only people who take 30-year cars and keep them on the road and not call it a classic are people in Venezuela because they can't get other cars. So Hosea is like, God, don't be like Venezuela. Get a new nation. Don't try to work with them anymore. They're not faithful. And God says to Hosea, okay, I want you to marry a prostitute. Now, there's a dispute whether this was a metaphorical prophecy or one that Hosea was expected to carry out. Because the names that Hosea gives his children during the prophecy are not ones in which you would typically name your kid. Right? It's like naming your kid bastard. Like, you don't want to do that. Like, that's not a good way for this person to make friends. And he or she is probably going to hate you for life if you use a word like that, right? Hebrew equivalent for that term is mamzer. The terms that Hosea picked for his children, you should look inside in the second chapter, you'll see they're kind of like, wow, I hope this isn't a real child. But the whole account is divinely inspired. And Hosea marries this Zona, this prostitute, and he knows that she is not going to be faithful to him. And lo and behold, what happens? She goes after other people, and Hosea is stuck with the Zona. So God says to Hosea, okay, send these children away. Send your wife away. The woman you've developed a relationship with, even though she's not faithful, right? Send them all away. And Hosea understands that emotionally, he can't do that. So Hosea then pivots, and Hosea then understands what Hashem is telling them. Hashem has a relationship with love based on the Jew that is rooted in love between God and the Jewish people. So Hosea then says, okay, now I understand why God's not going to replace it. The Jewish people are like that classic car. The one that we have memories of, the one that you paid off 30 years ago, that was the first car you ever had. You worked through high school to save up for it. It has the white wall tires. Maybe I'm going too far back. I'm a little bit reminded of that because you see all these old car and truck people driving around Olivet, Missouri. So people seem to really like their cars. They're also shiny new ones. And then they're the ones that were shiny and new until someone got into an accident, and then Yeah. So anyway, Hosea says that it understands that, as it were, to give an analogy, the Jewish people are like this old car that God has invested so much in and God is going to continue to invest in. So Hosea then pivots and says, okay, now I have to help inspire the Jewish people to do better. But what's the point of this? Why did our rabbis select this Haftorah to correspond to the beginning of the book of Bamidbar? Why here and why now? And I think the concept that Hashem is trying to teach us through this chapter and why our rabbi selected it for Parashat Bamidbar is as follows. The idea is you got to play the hand you dealt. Don't spend time wishing, hoping, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. If only this would have happened, then X or Y or Z. Because life doesn't work that way. The Jewish people in the book of Bamidbar, on their way to the land of Israel, get bogged down in complaint after complaint. Well, wouldn't it have been great had we still been in Mitzrayim so we could die there, but we would have had watermelon? Really? Your kid being baked into a brick and put into a wall of a building that was designed to collapse? That's better than going to Israel, even though you have to walk a long way and it's hot? Really? So you'd rather be slaves to someone who can do whatever they want to your women, and you don't want a land where you have your own sovereignty? Really? You have what? That doesn't make any sense. But that's what the Jewish people did. They didn't want to play the cards that they were dealt. We'll see in a few parashas the Jewish people about to enter the land of Israel are like, we can't do this. Look, we got to go back. Like this, we can't do this. And instead of saying, okay, how do we make this work? Hosea tried saying to God, get rid of the Jewish people. God's like, that's not how I created the world. We don't just say, oh, there's something challenging, there's a problem, delete. Start over. That's what we call that? We call that a video game. You call it the metaverse. Where you don't like your avatar, delete your profile, start again. You don't like the parcel of land that you were assigned in the metaverse, delete your profile, start again. That's not how life is. God did not design life so that we're just like, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. No, I'm just going to complain about everything. Life is about picking yourself up by your bootstraps and making something of yourself. It's challenging, but we're going through life with God. And God is saying to Hosea, I want a relationship with the Jewish people. I love the Jewish people. We're going to make this work. God's saying, I'm going to ignore the Jewish people's infidelity. I'm going to ignore their immorality. I'm going to ignore the fact that they were chasing after foreign gods. And as the book of Yechezkel indicates in chapter 16, the Jewish people embarrassed the non-Jews with the level of depravity that they had and how far they would go to serve idols that they would create that no other nation could understand. It's like, you're doing what? It's like the phrase, you put what where? Like you put another piercing? Like, what? God's like, despite all that, Hosea, I'm going to make it work. You just have to bring my mandate to the Jewish people again. Inspire them again. Because I'm not leaving this relationship. But we need to play the hand that we're dealt. God's playing the hand that he's dealt, as it were. He gave us free will. We choose to do what we do. And God makes that work. God gives us a rope. God gives us a leash. God gives us room to exercise our free will and to get rewarded for the positive choices that we make. If God's playing the hand that he is dealt, as it were, then so too we need to play our hand. Have a great week.